A family of 5 drove over 1,000 kilometers just to run away. On the road, the father asked his son to throw his phone out the window because he believed someone was tracking them. A few days later, police confirmed something puzzling. No one was tracking this family at all. So what made a completely normal family simultaneously flee in panic from a threat that didn't exist? Before we begin exploring, let me know where you're listening to this story from. Silvan, Victoria, late August 2016. Winter was almost over, but mornings were still cold. Fog hung low over the hills of the Yarra Ranges, where farms stretched to the forest's edge. The road leading to the Tromp family's property had almost no traffic in the early hours. Here, life began very early, before the sun climbed high. The Tromps lived and worked on the same piece of land. The farm was large, big enough to separate them from the outside world, but close enough to town that no one considered it remote. Their life was contained within familiar tasks: tending the orchard, checking machinery, preparing for a long day of work. Mark Tromp was the first one out each day. He'd been used to that for many years. Not talkative, not showy, just a middle-aged man who worked steadily, one day like any other. Jacoba, his wife, usually appeared not long after. She knew the books, the schedule, the day's tasks inside out. Their 3 children were also present from early on. Rihanna, Mitchell, and Ella, all grown adults, but hadn't left the farm. They worked with their parents, ate with their parents, and spent most of their time within the same daily orbit. To outsiders, that might look strange, but to the Tromps, it was normal. No clear signs of trouble. No one in this family was known for being temperamental or unusual. They weren't in debt. The business wasn't facing any major crisis. Neighbors saw them as a hard-working family, private but without problems. Yet during those days, the atmosphere inside the house had begun to change. In the evenings, the house no longer settled the way it used to. The television stayed on, but no one really watched it. Conversations stretched longer, yet moved in circles, never landing anywhere solid. Someone would start a sentence, stop midway, then change the subject entirely. The dining table became something else. Papers replaced plates, old invoices, bank statements, records going back years. They were stacked neatly, deliberately, not the mess of panic, but the order of people searching for proof that something had gone wrong. Mark reread the same figures again and again. Jacoba traced numbers with her finger, then looked up without speaking. No one accused anyone. No one raised their voice. No one said the word danger. But every movement in the house suggested they were already responding to it, not through arguments, not through raised voices, but through silent vigilance. Mark checked papers more frequently. Jacoba spent more time at the desk, flipping through old files. Family conversations lasted longer than usual, but no one outside knew what they were about. They began talking about money, not because they lacked it, but because of suspicion. Something wasn't right, something they hadn't seen yet. The numbers were still there, but the feeling of security was no longer intact. In those final days of August, the Tromp family spent hours reviewing documents, old invoices, financial records from years back, papers stacked into neat piles, orderly. Not the actions of a chaotic family, but of people trying to understand something slipping beyond their control. That worry had no name. No one said, "We're in danger." But it was present in every small decision, in how they looked at each other, in their wariness toward the outside world. What's notable is that worry didn't belong to just one person. Mark and Jacoba both shared that unease, and the children, though to varying degrees, were also pulled in. No sono. One stood completely outside to say this was absurd. No one left the family meeting table to find another perspective. Everything happened within the farm's boundaries, within the family's boundaries. August 29th arrived without warning. Not a day with incidents. No one in the house woke up thinking they were about to leave. But by late morning, a decision had been made. They would go. Not a short trip, not for relaxation, but to leave this place immediately. No one called to tell relatives. No one told the neighbors. No one left messages. Things tied to personal identity, phones, passports, bank cards, were all left behind. They chose cash. They chose the Peugeot. They chose to leave without leaving traces. When the car rolled away from the Silvan farm, the Tromp family was still intact. 5 people, 1 decision, 1 fear without a name yet. The Peugeot left Silvan while morning fog still lingered. No one said clearly where they were going. That question didn't seem to matter. The only thing mentioned, though not said outright, was they couldn't stay. Mark drove. He was used to operating machinery, used to long roads, and used to making decisions for the whole family. Jacoba sat beside him, quieter than usual. The 3 children sat in back, each carrying a different state of mind, but no one objected. They headed north. Initially, the trip looked more like a hasty departure than an escape. The car stopped for gas. Everyone still got out. No one appeared panicked in front of strangers. But in every small decision, something had changed. They avoided using anything that could leave traces. No phones, no cards, no asking directions with apps. Cash was withdrawn and used cautiously. Roadside diners, small gas stations, places that didn't require leaving information. Mitchell, the son, remained silent most of the time. He didn't argue, didn't resist. But in his head, this trip still had no clear shape. He didn't fully believe they were in danger. But he also didn't leave. Not out of fear, but because of family. The phone in his bag felt like contraband. Mitchell didn't bring it to call anyone. He carried it like a final exit. If things went beyond limits, he'd still have a way to reconnect with the outside world. But that phone didn't last long. Near the town of Warburton, as the car drove through a winding stretch through the forest, Mark discovered it. No one knows exactly how. Just that in that moment, the atmosphere in the car completely changed. The reaction wasn't anger, it was fear. Mark believed the phone was a tracking point, something that could reveal their location. Jacoba agreed. No prolonged debate, no hesitation. Mark demanded Mitchell throw the phone out, not turn it off, not put it away, but throw it away immediately. Mitchell looked out the car window. The road ran long through trees. No people, no houses, just releasing his hand would do it. And he did. The phone disappeared behind them, falling onto the roadside, abandoned like a dangerous object. From that moment, the trip changed nature. No longer a family leaving home to avoid trouble, but a family that had cut off all connection to familiar reality. No one said it, but everyone felt it. No easy way back anymore. No one to call if something happened. No map in hand. The car kept going. Day turned to night. They didn't turn around. No major discussion occurred. No one asked the question, where are we going? Or who's tracking us? Those questions seemed less important than the feeling they had to keep moving. They drove through the night. By dawn, they were very far from Silvan, farther than any trip the Tromp family had ever taken together. Exhaustion began showing, but with it came another feeling, something like momentum. Once you've gone too far, turning back seems more terrifying than continuing. Mitchell began realizing what worried him wasn't that someone was chasing them, but that his parents believed someone was. That belief didn't waver, didn't need proof. didn't need confirmation, and it was controlling every decision. By the morning of August 30th, the Peugeot reached near Bathurst, New South Wales. More than a day on the road. Nearly 800 kilometers had passed behind. At this point, the Tromp family was no longer people who'd just gone a bit far. They'd left their old world behind. And in Bathurst, for the first time, one person in the car couldn't continue believing in that fear anymore. Mitchell said he needed to leave. Not in anger. Not through a big argument. Just a brief decision. He left the car, found his way to the train station, began the journey back to Melbourne, alone. The Peugeot kept rolling with Mitchell no longer there. After Mitchell left, the silence in the car felt different. It wasn't just quieter, it was heavier. No one filled the space he left behind. Mark drove longer without stopping. Jacoba stopped asking questions altogether. The road signs passed, but no one pointed them out anymore. No one asked where they were headed next. Decisions were made without being spoken. For Rihanna and Ella, something shifted without words. They understood, instinctively, that the last voice still anchored to the outside world had just stepped off the journey. Whatever this was now, it belonged entirely to their parents. The Tromp family kept going. But from that moment, they were no longer 5 people. Bathurst, morning of August 30th, 2016, wasn't where the Tromp family stopped to rest. It was just a point where the trip was forced to slow down after nearly a day and a half continuously on the road, when exhaustion began showing clearly on every face. Mitchell left in silence. No goodbye hugs, no promises to stay in touch. He just stepped out of the Peugeot, carrying very few belongings, as if afraid that hesitating one more minute, he wouldn't be clear-headed enough to leave the family. He walked toward the train station, choosing the opposite path, returning to Melbourne. In Mitchell's head at that moment was no long-term plan, just one single thought. If he continued staying in that car, he'd lose the ability to make his own decisions like the others. The Peugeot left Bathurst without looking back. Mark continued driving, maintaining speed, as if Mitchell disappearing from the back seat didn't create any significant gap. Jacoba didn't turn her head to look. The 2 daughters sat in back, quieter than before. Mitchell's absence didn't stop the trip. Instead, it made everything quieter, heavier, as if the last dissenting voice had left the car's confined space. They continued heading east, going deeper into New South Wales. The next destination was Jenolan Caves, a tourist landmark situated in the mountains, far from residential areas and almost completely isolated from outside life. It wasn't a place someone sought for safety. But for the Tromp family, isolation brought a different feeling. Fewer people, fewer eyes, fewer questions. At Jenolan Caves, what remained of the family began clearly fracturing. Mark and Jacoba became increasingly closed off, talking to each other more, but hardly speaking with the children. Decisions were made faster, more decisively, and without explanation. Rihanna and Ella sensed that change. They no longer saw their parents as the safe anchor they once were. The tension didn't explode into arguments, but spread through every prolonged silence, every avoiding glance, every action without stated reason. Somewhere during that day, the 2 sisters decided to leave. Not a carefully prepared plan. No time to weigh consequences. Just a survival reflex. Create distance as fast as possible. They left their parents, taking another vehicle. Whose vehicle it was, or whether they had permission to use it, no longer mattered. The only thing that mattered was leaving the source of tension that was becoming unbearable. The sisters' car headed toward Goulburn. On the road, the fear didn't disappear. It just changed shape. No longer fear of being tracked by an invisible force, but fear of what had just happened within the family. In Goulburn, Rihanna and Ella stopped. Here, for the first time since leaving Silvan, they went to police. Not to accuse their parents, not to blame anyone, just to say something was very wrong, and they didn't know what to do next. After reporting, the two sisters separated again. Ella decided to return to Victoria. She thought about the farm, the horses needing care, something familiar she could hold on to. By that evening, Ella reached Silvan and saw police already present at the house. Rihanna stayed in Goulburn. No one saw the moment she left the police station. No one knew how she traveled. Only that a few hours later, a man driving a small truck felt something unusual behind his vehicle. When he stopped to check, he discovered a young woman lying curled up in the truck bed. She couldn't say her name, didn't know where she was, eyes empty, body motionless, as if she'd completely withdrawn from the surrounding world. Her name was Rihanna Tromp. When police were called, the Tromp family no longer existed as a unified entity. They'd separated, each person in a different place, each in a different mental state, scattered across hundreds of kilometers of road. And somewhere on those roads, the initial fear, the thing that made them leave Silvan, continued moving, though it no longer needed everyone to believe in it. Late afternoon on August 31st, 2016, the gray Peugeot turned south, leaving New South Wales and entering Victoria. Only 2 people remained in the car. No more children's conversation. No more interrupting questions from the back seat. The car cabin was so silent that every engine sound was clearer than normal. Mark drove. Jacoba sat beside him, hands on her lap, eyes looking straight ahead. Both didn't mention the children leaving. They didn't talk about Mitchell. Didn't talk about the 2 daughters. As if just touching that topic, everything left would collapse too. The road stretched through small towns in northeastern Victoria. Streetlights became sparse. Darkness fell faster than they anticipated. Mark kept glancing at the rearview mirror, not because a car was following close, but because he believed if he didn't look, something would appear. Jacoba noticed that tension. She lowered her voice, as if afraid someone else would hear. "Are you sure we're going the right direction?" Mark didn't look over. He only replied, "We can't stop." As the car approached Wangaratta, Mark began slowing down. Behind them, another vehicle appeared and disappeared multiple times in the mirror. Each time it appeared, Mark gripped the steering wheel tighter. To him, that repetition wasn't coincidence. It was a sign. Jacoba turned around. She looked back for a few seconds, then turned forward. "It's still there," she said. Mark nodded, as if confirming what he'd believed. From the start, the young couple in the car ahead began feeling uncomfortable. The Peugeot was following too close, not passing, not turning, not leaving. When they sped up, the car behind sped up too. When they slowed down, the distance remained the same. They pulled over to the side of the road. The Peugeot also stopped. Mark got out of the car. He didn't say anything, didn't approach immediately, just stood there, between the car lights and roadside darkness, staring forward. His face rigid, eyes not leaving the other vehicle. Suddenly he ran a few steps towards them, then stopped, as if he himself didn't know what he was doing. No threats, no violent gestures, but that was enough to terrify the couple. They drove away and called police. When police arrived near Marawa Park, the Peugeot had been abandoned by the roadside. Keys still in the ignition, car door ajar. Jacoba was no longer in the vehicle. No one saw when she left. Mark stood a few meters from the car, looking around as if searching for an escape route. When police lights shone on him, he turned and ran. Didn't say a word. Didn't go back for belongings. He bolted straight into the park, then disappeared among the tree canopy. "Don't come closer," he shouted when hearing calls from behind. His voice broke, not from anger, but from panic. Police gave chase, but the forest quickly swallowed the middle-aged man's figure. Rough terrain, dense trees, dark and cold. Tracking dogs were deployed, but the scent trail thinned. Mark Tromp disappeared. The search continued long into the night. Flashlights swept across tree trunks and muddy ground. Dogs strained against their handlers. Officers called his name into the dark, but the forest gave nothing back. Somewhere out there, Mark Tromp was alone for the first time since leaving Silvan. No car, no family, no one to confirm or deny what he believed. And yet, even alone, the fear did not leave him. That night, the search lasted for hours. Flashlights swept across every trail, every low bush. No one found him. No one heard any other sounds besides wind and searchers' footsteps. Meanwhile, Jacoba had left the area somehow. No one knew how. No witnesses, no cameras. Only that when the Peugeot was discovered, she was no longer there. By late evening, police were forced to temporarily suspend the search. The night forest was too vast. Time wasn't on their side. In many different places, at that same moment, the remaining pieces of the Tromp family were being found. A son sitting on a train returning to Melbourne. A daughter lying motionless in Goulburn Hospital. Another daughter standing before the house in Silvan, not knowing how to answer police questions. And the father, who'd once been the family's center, was somewhere in the darkness, believing if he just stopped, everything would end. The night of August 31st passed without any further signs of Mark Tromp. The Tromp family was no longer a family on the map. They'd become scattered points, separated, each person in one place, connected only by a fear no one was clear-headed enough anymore to name. On the morning of September 1st, 2016, news about the Tromp family began spreading in a fragmented way. Not a complete story, but pieces reported from many different places, each piece carrying a different mental state. At Lake George, near Goulburn, a truck driver named Keith Whitaker stopped his vehicle after feeling something bump lightly against the driver's seat. When he opened the cargo door in back, he discovered a young woman lying curled up on the floor, eyes open but unresponsive. She didn't answer when asked her name, didn't say where she was from, didn't know where she was. Her body motionless, as if she'd withdrawn from the surrounding world, only slow breathing and empty gaze remaining. That girl was Rihanna Tromp. Police and medical personnel were called. When they tried to communicate, Rihanna didn't resist, but didn't cooperate, either. She didn't cry, didn't call for help, didn't show fear. Just lay still, as if everything that just happened no longer concerned her. Rihanna was taken to Goulburn Hospital. Doctors noted she was in a state of severe mental exhaustion. No one knew how far she'd traveled after leaving Goulburn Police Station, nor how she ended up in a stranger's truck bed. That same day, over 200 kilometers south of Lake George, Jacoba Tromp was discovered in the town of Yass. A resident saw her walking along a road on the town's edge, looking exhausted, eyes panicked, clothes no longer neat. When questioned, Jacoba spoke in fragments. She believed she was in danger, that someone was following, that if she stayed too long, something terrible would happen. The resident took her to the local hospital. At Yass Hospital, medical staff quickly recognized the name Jacoba Tromp matched the woman police were searching for. She was kept for mental health monitoring, then transferred to Goulburn Hospital to be near her daughter. Meanwhile, in Silvan, Ella Tromp had reached the farm the previous evening. When she saw police cars parked at the gate, the feeling of safety she'd sought the entire journey back immediately vanished. Ella told police she just wanted to return to care for the horses. She didn't say much more. Didn't clearly explain why she'd left her parents. Didn't recount details of what happened on the road. Police noted she was tense, tired, but lucid. Ella was the only family member who returned to the starting point, but it was no longer home in the true sense. For 2 full days, the final piece still hadn't been found. Mark Tromp remained missing. By the afternoon of September 3, 2016, a resident in Wangaratta called police after seeing a man walking disheveled along the road near the airport. This person looked haggard, beard growing patchy, clothes dirty and wrinkled, but not seriously injured. When police approached, the man didn't run. He stood still, eyes avoiding, seemingly no longer strong enough to continue hiding. He confirmed his name was Mark Tromp. Mark was taken to the station for health checks. He was dehydrated, exhausted, but lucid. When asked about recent days, he said very little. Didn't recount details. Didn't explain why he'd run into the forest. Just repeated that he believed he and his family were in danger. "We just wanted to be safe," he said. That was one of few statements recorded. After Mark was found, the Tromp family's collective disappearance officially closed. No bodies, no crime, no suspects, but also no clear explanation. Rihanna and Jacoba continued receiving treatment at Goulburn Hospital. Mitchell had returned to Melbourne earlier, choosing not to appear before media. Ella stayed in Silvan, facing police and questions she didn't want to answer. The Tromp family was found, but no longer intact. They didn't return together. Each person carried a part of the trip, a part of the fear, and a part of the silence. And when everyone was confirmed safe, the biggest question still remained there, floating among pieces that didn't fit. Not about where they'd gone, but why they believed they had to run, to the point of losing each other along that entire journey. When the Tromp family disappeared from news headlines, their story didn't truly end. It just shifted to another form, existing quietly in side conversations, in forums, and in how people tried to assign meaning to an event without clear explanation. Hypotheses began appearing almost immediately. Some believed Mark Tromp had discovered a serious problem in the financial books, something big enough to make him believe the family was in danger. But police checked all records and found no signs of fraud or threats. No one was suing them. No one was trying to seize assets. Some thought the family had accidentally contacted some poison or chemical during agricultural work, causing everyone to fall into an unstable state. Medical tests didn't support this hypothesis. No signs of poisoning, no accompanying physical symptoms. Then people talked about stress, work pressure, closed-off life. 3 adult children still living and working completely within the family orbit. All of that sounded plausible, but wasn't enough to explain why the fear appeared simultaneously, strong enough to make the entire family run without looking back. Police, in internal reports, used more cautious terms. They spoke of a serious mental health crisis incident. Something had been triggered, but left no physical traces. No clear starting point. No moment people could point to and say, right here, everything went off track. The Tromp family didn't refute those speculations, but they didn't confirm them either. When Mitchell was asked, he said he didn't feel directly threatened during the trip. He just knew his parents were very scared, and he went along because that was the only thing he thought he could do at that time. At home, that time, everything was wrong, he said. But I don't know how to explain it. Ella said nothing different. She admitted their minds at that time were unstable, but refused to go deeper. She only said returning home was the only thing that helped her feel she could still hold on to reality. Rihanna, when recovered, described those days in very short sentences. She said she remembered the feeling of fear, but didn't clearly remember what she feared. As if the fear existed first, and the reason was only assigned afterward. As for Mark Tromp, he rarely appeared publicly after the incident. When he spoke up, it was a brief apology, not mentioning details, not trying to justify. He called what happened a difficult period, then stopped there. The Tromp family returned to Silvan and lived more quietly than before. They avoided mentioning the trip. They didn't retell the story to outsiders. For them, continuing life seemed more important than explaining the past. But for those following the case, the question remained. What could make a completely normal family simultaneously believe they were in danger to the point of fleeing from their own lives? What was strong enough for fear to spread from one person to another, overcoming reason, crossing generational distance, and only stopping when the family was separated? No official answer was given. No file closed with a definitive conclusion. Only a story remained, like an uncomfortable reminder. Sometimes people don't need a tangible enemy to collapse. Sometimes the most dangerous thing is a shared belief, strong enough to lead an entire family astray from reality and leave them each in a different place, trying to piece life back together from what remains. When the family returned to Silvan months later, the land was the same. The trees hadn't moved. The buildings still stood where they had always been. But something subtle had changed. Neighbors noticed the farm grew quieter, fewer visitors, fewer conversations. The family no longer lingered in town the way they once had. Life resumed, but cautiously, as if everyone understood, without discussing it, that what happened in August wasn't something that could be fully explained or neatly put away. The investigation ended where it was designed to end. Every member of the Tromp family was located. No crime had been committed. No external threat could be identified. From a procedural standpoint, there was nothing left to pursue. No suspect to name, no charge to file, no danger to neutralize. But understanding does not always arrive where procedure stops. Police could confirm that no one had been tracking the Tromp family, that no device had been planted, no account monitored, no hostile party involved. What the investigation could not explain was why that belief became strong enough to override instinct, routine, and self-preservation, not in one person, but across an entire family at the same time, without visible resistance. One element, rarely addressed, is the absence of interruption in their lives. For years, the Tromps lived and worked inside the same closed system, where family, labor, authority, and identity occupied the same physical and psychological space. There were few moments where an outside voice could interrupt an internal narrative once it began to take shape. When doubt appeared, it had nowhere to exit, and no counterweight strong enough to slow it down. In that kind of environment, belief does not arrive suddenly. It accumulates quietly. Another overlooked detail is how fear behaved in this case. What happened to the Tromp family did not resemble panic as most people imagine it. Panic is loud, chaotic, impulsive, and short-lived. What unfolded here was controlled, deliberate, and structured. Documents were reviewed. Decisions were made systematically. Technology was abandoned with intention, not confusion. That kind of behavior does not come from losing one's mind. It comes from being convinced. Once a belief reaches that stage, it no longer requires evidence to sustain itself. It only needs continuity. Each action reinforces the next, and every step taken in response to the belief becomes proof that the belief was justified in the first place. By the time the family was on the road, the fear no longer needed a source. It had become the organizing principle of their reality. The role of technology in this collapse was never fully examined, yet it may have been critical. For the younger members of the family, phones were not just tools of convenience. They were anchors to verification, contradiction, and reassurance. When the phone was thrown out of the car, more than a device was lost. The easiest path back to an external reality disappeared with it. After that moment, there was no simple way to check whether the fear made sense. There was only movement, Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the Tromp case is that nothing extraordinary was required to trigger it. There was no cult, no drugs, no hidden enemy, no conspiracy waiting to be uncovered. Just stress, isolation, authority, and a narrative that hardened before anyone stepped outside it long enough to question it. The family did not collapse because they were weak or irrational. They collapsed because they trusted each other completely, and that is the part no investigation can comfortably write down. Because if the story were about something rare or monstrous, it would be easy to dismiss. But this was not a breakdown fueled by madness or malice. It was fueled by something far more ordinary: the human need for certainty when uncertainty becomes unbearable. The Tromp family did not flee from a threat that did not exist. They fled from the possibility that something was wrong, and once that possibility hardened into belief, there was no longer room for doubt to survive. There was no villain to blame, no event to point to, no single moment where reality clearly broke. Only this uncomfortable truth remained. Fear doesn't always arrive with evidence. Sometimes it arrives as certainty. If you want to continue exploring stories where the line between reality and belief is blurred, subscribe to the channel. And if there's a case that still haunts you, leave it in the comments. Sometimes, the scariest thing isn't what happened, but that it could absolutely happen again.